And if somebody said, you know, you're with a man because it's rich and famous, they don't know.
Feel that in some way you helped make him president?
Absolutely. Because Donald would come on my show. I mean, look.
Does it make you feel bad or good?
Well, look, I did not vote for Donald Trump.
Everything seemed completely normal at first, until Howard Stern suddenly brought back stories that many people thought were buried for good. Within moments, Donald Trump found himself surrounded by controversy once again, while Melania Trump appeared caught in the middle of the growing attention. The atmosphere quickly became tense, reactions started exploding online, and the situation spiraled into something far more dramatic than anyone expected.
Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years. You're asking, we have Texas, we have this, we have all of the things. And
trashing Rosie was something you had in common with Donald Trump.
Yeah, well.
Okay, how many times did you have Donald Trump on?
Too many to count. Donald Trump appears 11 times in my book, and it's a fascinating...
If you're enjoying the video so far, don't forget to subscribe because it really supports the channel. What started as Howard Stern revisiting some of his old interviews with Donald Trump quickly turned into something much bigger than simple nostalgia. Instead of feeling like harmless memories, the resurfaced conversations opened the door to moments many believed would stay in the past forever. Especially for Melania Trump, who suddenly had those old headlines returning all over again.
He was an open book. He would say anything. And, you know, oddly enough, during the campaign and even now, people quote these interviews that I did with him big time.
What makes this entire controversy so interesting is not simply the fact that old interviews resurfaced, but the raw and unfiltered nature of those conversations. They captured a version of celebrity culture where people spoke freely, without considering how their words might return years later with completely different consequences. At that time, Trump was not speaking as a political leader trying to protect a presidential image. He was operating as a celebrity personality who treated interviews like entertainment, where limits barely existed, and controversial comments often became part of the show itself.
Push false claims about some of your rivals, from Nikki Haley to former President Barack Obama, saying that they were not born in the United States, which is not true.
Trump would come on my show, and this is why he was great. There was no filter. I go, Donald, Angelina Jolie, she's one of the most beautiful actresses in the world. She's a 6. You know.
Howard Stern thrived in exactly that type of environment because his reputation was built around pushing conversations into uncomfortable territory most people would avoid completely. Trump stepped right into those discussions with the confidence of someone convinced nothing he said would ever follow him later in life. Stern did more than interview Trump regularly. He almost turned him into a recurring personality whose appearances needed to become more shocking every single time. The discussions frequently drifted into deeply personal subjects, especially involving Melania, with Stern asking questions designed to see how far Trump was willing to go publicly. Surprisingly, Trump rarely pulled back, often seeming comfortable with the attention that came from making comments most public figures would avoid entirely.
He was wild. I thought I was wild. He would come on. He would start assigning numbers to women and evaluating. I'm like, is this guy for real? What is he doing?
Like rating them, 1 through 10.
1 through 10, I went, yes. Yeah.
This is where the story starts shifting from entertaining to genuinely uncomfortable. Because Stern never hid his approach when discussing women, and Trump often played along without hesitation. Topics about appearance, attraction, and desirability became common parts of the conversations, with people often being discussed as though they were part of a competition, judged entirely on looks. Stern encouraged the tone, Trump leaned into it, and together, they created moments that once passed as outrageous entertainment. But today, those same clips collide with the expectations attached to a former president. Suddenly, what once sounded like shock humor now raises completely different reactions, leaving Melania at the center of renewed public attention surrounding her marriage.
Most people, if they're having that thought, keep that pretty guarded. Not Donald. He was right into it. Ivanka Trump.
You know who's one of the great beauties of the world, according to everybody, and I helped create her? Who? Ivanka.
Stern himself has admitted that Trump was one of the most unforgettable guests he ever had, largely because he was so unpredictable. Trump answered questions most public figures would instantly avoid, and rarely seemed worried about how his comments could later be interpreted. That unpredictability made the interviews hugely entertaining at the time, but it also created a massive archive of material that now carries a very different impact. Some of the most discussed moments involve Trump's opinions and personal remarks, including comments connected to people close to him, which only deepened public disbelief. Now, imagine those moments suddenly returning to headlines, while Melania is expected to remain calm, composed, and silent under constant media attention. It creates the kind of pressure that feels almost impossible to ignore, because personal history and public scrutiny become impossible to separate.
But in your mind, a great guest.
No, a great guest because he would say anything that came into his mind. He was completely unfiltered. He was talking about his daughter was the most attractive woman he ever met and how much he thought she was hot.
The fact that these clips continue spreading across platforms makes the entire situation feel unavoidable, almost as though the past refuses to stay buried. Stern's own perspective on Trump has also changed over time, adding another layer to the story. He has openly questioned Trump's motivations for entering politics, suggesting that ambition, publicity, and influence may have played a bigger role than genuine political passion. That interpretation changes the narrative entirely, because it makes Trump's rise feel less like a traditional political journey and more like the expansion of a powerful personal brand. When those ideas are combined with resurfaced clips filled with casual and highly personal conversations, the contrast becomes impossible to overlook. On one side stands the polished image of leadership, while on the other exists a collection of candid moments that feel almost unbelievable today.
Stern and Trump, not as close as they used to be.
The turning point in my relationship with Donald was he did ask me to speak at the convention, and I had to say no. And
Were you tempted at all?
Well, since I was a Hillary supporter, for a minute I thought, well, I'll go up and endorse Hillary.
Melania's role in all of this becomes increasingly difficult, because the issue is not only the return of old interviews, but also the way those interviews portrayed her relationship with Trump. Stern frequently questioned why Trump stayed committed to her, despite constantly being surrounded by attention and other possibilities. The conversations often sounded more provocative than curious, turning a private relationship into public speculation. As these clips spread online again, the reactions themselves become part of the story. The internet has a way of reviving old moments and transforming them into brand new controversies overnight. Combined with Stern's interview style and Trump's willingness to participate, the result creates endless discussion that refuses to disappear quietly. What makes it even more fascinating is how clearly it highlights the difference between Trump's past public image and the expectations attached to him today. The version of Trump seen on Stern's show embraced controversy, loved attention, and treated shock value almost like entertainment.
We're going to turn to Georgia's interview with radio legend Howard Stern. We hear it's very candid.
It is candid. Howard talks about everything and anything. As you know, he has no filter, but this book is still full of surprises, a lot of self-reflection from Howard.
I don't have the courage to play.
But your prenup, is it going to be like Britney Spears? She gets $300,000 a year for every year that she's with you, or is it going to be less?
We're going to have a prenup. You have to have a prenup.
Have you started working on it
I've written
yet?
too many books, Robin, about prenups not to have one. I said
you have to. You have to.
No,
be
I have men
protected.
that are destroyed. I have friends that are very smart, killed.
The Trump connected to the presidency exists under a completely different level of scrutiny, where every statement and every action is analyzed in detail. The clash between those two versions creates a narrative that feels difficult to reconcile. Stern has openly acknowledged his role in creating many of these unforgettable moments, describing Trump as someone always willing to go further than expected for the sake of entertainment. At the time, it made for compelling radio, but years later, it also created complications nobody fully predicted. Now that those interviews are being examined again through a modern lens, the situation feels far more dramatic than it once did. Melania's response, whether directly expressed or interpreted through media coverage, becomes an important focus because it reminds people there is a real human side behind all the spectacle. Beneath the humor and controversy, someone is still navigating a deeply public challenge.
I think Donald would give me anything I'd ask.
You really believe that?
Oh, I believe it forever, 100%. That if Ben Carson can get in there, and I think Donald would have appointed me.
Because he's transactional, or
I think he would have been grateful that I'm on his team.
The irony behind the entire situation is hard to ignore because the same qualities that once made Trump such an entertaining guest are now the exact traits creating controversy around him today. His willingness to speak freely, ignore boundaries, and embrace attention helped make those interviews unforgettable, but they also complicated his later public image. As more clips continue circulating online, the story keeps evolving with every new reaction and interpretation. It stops feeling like a single interview controversy and starts becoming part of a larger conversation about living in an era where nothing truly disappears forever. The entire situation feels like a collision between entertainment culture and political reality, where old moments return with consequences nobody expected at the time. The mix of unpredictability, controversy, and media attention guarantees that the discussion continues growing instead of quietly fading away.
I mean, it was wild every time. In the book, you'll read about he gets into an argument with the Daily News gossip columnist A.J. Benza. They're fighting over a woman that they both had sex with on the air. I mean, it's...
As the spotlight continues focusing on this ongoing drama, one thing becomes obvious. When the past returns, it rarely does so quietly. It doesn't soften over time, especially when the people involved built their public image around controversy and bold personalities. As these resurfaced clips continue making rounds online, the conversation becomes less about the comments themselves and more about why they are being revisited in today's environment. Statements that once survived on pure shock value are now being analyzed under a completely different standard, where audiences expect accountability and context. Stern's role also becomes more interesting when viewed through the evolution of media itself. The same environment that once rewarded outrageous honesty now exists alongside audiences who carefully dissect every word and every detail. Conversations that once felt edgy and entertaining now seem like artifacts from a time when public consequences felt distant rather than immediate.
To speak at the RNC, I think that
Yeah.
I had no idea about that.
He used to call me from the campaign trail, and I think he was really desirous of my endorsement because A, I have a big audience, and B, he's familiar with that audience, and I think it would have been very comforting for him.
For Melania, the situation turns into something much more complicated than a temporary controversy, because every resurfaced clip brings another wave of attention with it. The idea that deeply personal aspects of her life were discussed so openly creates an obvious sense of discomfort, especially when those conversations invite speculation instead of understanding. At the same time, the spectacle surrounding the entire situation continues attracting attention, because the contrast between past behavior and present expectations feels almost unreal. In many ways, the story becomes about transformation, public perception, and the strange way history can suddenly return when least expected. What makes everything even more compelling is the realization that this is not an isolated moment, but part of a much larger pattern where public figures constantly find themselves revisited through the lens of their past. Every resurfaced clip, every reaction, and every new interpretation adds another layer to a story that never seems fully complete, proving that reinvention becomes difficult when old memories remain this vivid.